family men. I mean, hard to believe all that, but they were Uncle Frank and Dad.
If you only read the headlines, you would think Dean Martin and his former wife, John Martin, reached the end of their lives in peace. But according to their daughter, Dina Martin, that version leaves out much of the truth. Behind the glamorous image was a family shaped by broken relationships, painful sacrifices, and heartbreak that never fully healed. Hollywood celebrated Dean Martin as a legendary entertainer, while Jean remained largely in the background despite standing beside him during some of the most important years of his life. The public saw success and elegance. The family experienced something far more complicated.
Easygoing, he was exactly what you see. I mean, around the house, he was exactly how he was. The only reason we knew he wasn't working was he wasn't wearing a tuxedo.
Dina says the deepest wound came with the loss of her brother, a tragedy that changed her father forever and pushed him further into isolation. It was a pain from which he never truly recovered. So why did Dina wait so many years to speak openly about what happened behind closed doors? And was Dean Martin's story really a happy ending, or the final chapter of a much larger tragedy hidden from public view? Before Dean Martin became a household name, he was Dino Crocetti, the son of Italian immigrants. Growing up, he spoke only Italian at home and often felt like an outsider at school. Unable to fit in, he became a frequent target for teasing and learned an early lesson. Staying quiet was often safer than speaking up. That habit followed him into adulthood. Dana believes her father became an expert at hiding his insecurities behind charm and confidence. On stage, he seemed effortless. Off stage, he was much more reserved. According to Dina, her father was never cruel or uncaring. He simply struggled with emotional conversations. Performing for an audience came naturally. Opening up to the people closest to him was much harder. Dina Martin often says her father was physically present but emotionally distant. He sat with the family, shared meals, and spent time at home. Yet there was always a feeling that part of him remained somewhere else. No one openly discussed it, but everyone sensed it. Even away from the spotlight, Dean Martin often seemed as though he was still playing a role.
He was so light and easy. Poor mother, though, she had to be the disciplinarian.
My father wasn't cold, Dana once explained. He just didn't know where to begin. It was a simple statement that captured the man she knew behind the public image. One of the biggest misconceptions about Dean Martin was his famous onstage persona. Audiences saw a man holding a drink, joking through slurred words and appearing effortlessly carefree. But according to Dina, much of it was an act. The glass often contained apple juice, not alcohol. The lovable, happy drunk was a carefully crafted character designed to make people laugh and keep them from looking too closely at his private life. That image became more than entertainment. It became protection. Behind the jokes and easygoing charm, Dean could avoid difficult questions, painful emotions, and personal vulnerabilities. The character gave him a place to hide. At home, the stage act disappeared, but the habit of keeping people at a distance remained.
Of 16 is getting a car for their birthday. He said, well, then you shouldn't have any trouble getting a ride to school.
Over time, Dana says her father became so dependent on that public mask that he struggled to connect without it. The role that once brought him success also prevented others from truly knowing him. For years, the act worked. It covered loneliness, uncertainty, and emotional wounds. But eventually, real tragedy arrived, and no performance could shield him from it. According to Dana, there came a point when the character that had protected her father for decades could no longer save him. When Dana speaks about her mother, Jeanne Martin, her tone changes completely. To the public, Jean was simply the wife of a superstar. To her family, she was the foundation that held everything together. While Dean traveled, performed, and lived under constant public attention, Jean managed the home, raised the children, and kept the family steady through years of pressure and rumors. Dana often describes her mother as the quiet force behind everything. Jeanne was fully aware of the gossip and speculation surrounding her marriage, yet she rarely responded publicly, not because she was unaware of the truth, but because she believed protecting her family mattered more than winning public battles. "My mother wasn't blind," Dina once said. "She chose endurance." Rather than fueling conflict, Jean focused on keeping her children safe from the chaos surrounding their famous father. She understood that some truths, if exposed publicly, could tear a family apart.
So I did. I had to go on the road a little, and I went all over the country. And then he came to see me when I played somewhere. And he said, "Yeah, I'd like to have you on the show." So
For her, preserving the family came first, even when it required tremendous personal sacrifice. According to Dina Martin, her mother's silence came at a tremendous cost. Jeanne Martin spent years shielding her children from the pressures surrounding their famous father, often putting the family's stability ahead of her own feelings. She rarely complained, but the burden never disappeared. "My mother's silence was the price our family paid to survive," Dana once reflected. Dana does not see her mother as a woman standing quietly behind a legend. Instead, she sees someone who carried the heaviest responsibilities while protecting everyone else from the fallout. In many ways, Jean became the foundation that kept the family together through years of uncertainty. When conversations turn to Dean Martin's early life, Dina says people often overlook how difficult his childhood really was. Long before fame arrived, he left school early and took whatever work he could find. Some jobs were rough, including bootlegging and bare-knuckle boxing, simply to earn money and survive. Those experiences shaped him deeply. They taught him to be cautious, to trust slowly, and to understand that life could change without warning. "My father learned very early how to survive," Dina explains. Because of that upbringing, Dean entered show business with a different mindset than many of his peers. He understood how the world worked behind the scenes and rarely revealed more than he had to. Dina avoids discussing rumors about organized crime connections, always returning to the same point. Survival was the lesson that stayed with her father throughout his life. She believes those early years explain much about the man he became. Dean Martin often kept emotional distance, remained guarded, and struggled to fully relax. Beneath the smooth confidence was someone who never completely believed security would last forever. Looking back, Dina says her father did not seek darkness or danger. He simply grew up around it and never forgot how quickly everything could disappear.
they had to. He didn't like to rehearse, that's for sure, but he liked to know what he was doing.
The same misunderstanding followed him into his years with the Rat Pack. To the public, Dean Martin appeared to be the group's biggest partier. With a drink in hand and a relaxed smile, he seemed perfectly at home in the world of late-night casinos and endless celebrations. But Dina insists the reality was very different. "People think my father was the wildest one," she says. The truth is, he usually wanted to leave first. Once the shows ended, Dean often headed home rather than staying out all night. The carefree image that audiences loved was largely another performance. Behind it was a man who preferred quieter moments and who never felt quite as comfortable with the spotlight as people believed. The more Dina reflects on her father's life, the clearer one truth becomes: the public knew the character. Very few people ever knew the man behind it. Despite his reputation, Dean Martin was never the type to stay at parties until sunrise. According to Dana Martin, he often left early, slipped away quietly, and preferred being home rather than surrounded by crowds. Over time, people in entertainment circles began noticing a change. Dean was slowly distancing himself from the Rat Pack. He wasn't making dramatic announcements or starting arguments. He simply showed up less often and seemed less interested in the non-stop social life that defined the group's image. "My father never liked anything that went on too long," Dana says, "even fame." She believes the real reason was emotional exhaustion. For years, Dean had played the role everyone expected: the carefree entertainer, the easygoing friend, the life of the party. Eventually, he grew tired of performing, even off stage. While others thrived on attention, Dean increasingly sought quiet moments. He rarely spoke about parties or glamorous nights out. He would come home, change clothes, and retreat into silence. Looking back, Dina says the man who appeared to love the spotlight was actually searching for a way out of it. Then came the tragedy that changed everything. When Dean's son, Dean Paul Martin, died in a plane crash, the loss devastated the entire family. For the public, it was a tragic headline. For those closest to him, it marked the beginning of a completely different chapter. Dana remembers the shock that followed the news. The house became unusually quiet, as though all the energy had been drained from it. But what affected her most was watching her father's response. There were no public breakdowns or emotional speeches. Instead, Dean withdrew into himself. He avoided conversations, spent more time alone, and seemed emotionally unreachable. "I watched my father leave the room," Dana later said, even though he was still sitting there. Physically, he remained present. Emotionally, something had changed forever. After Dean Paul's death, the things that once gave Dean purpose, performing, socializing, even planning for the future, appeared less important. The emotional distance he had always maintained became far greater. What had once been a protective barrier turned into a wall. The family continued moving forward, but Dina says they all felt the same painful truth. A part of their family died that day alongside Dean Paul. Looking back, she doesn't describe it as the moment her father broke down. She describes it as the moment he quietly let go. Not all at once, but through a gradual retreat from the life he had spent decades building. For Dina, there is a clear dividing line in her father's life, before 1987 and after 1987. Before, Dean Martin could still hide behind the character he created. After losing his son, that mask no longer worked. The performer who had spent a lifetime acting as though nothing could hurt him was finally facing a pain too great to conceal. After the death of Dean Paul Martin, the role Dean Martin had played for decades began to disappear. According to Dina Martin, alcohol was no longer part of an act or a stage persona. It became a way to escape the pain that had settled into his life. No one in the family needed to discuss it openly. The change was obvious. Even Jerry Lewis later acknowledged what many close to Dean had already seen. He had begun letting go, not through scandal or public meltdowns, but through a quiet withdrawal from the discipline and routines that once defined him. Grief gradually took control. Dina remembers small but telling changes. Her father stopped talking about long-term plans. Before, there was always another show, another project, another destination. After 1987, he seemed unable to look very far ahead. He stopped saying later, Dina recalled. There was only today. The transformation was slow enough that outsiders barely noticed. Dean still smiled in public and fulfilled obligations when necessary. But those closest to him could see that something fundamental had changed. The drive that had carried him through decades of success was fading. What hurt Dina most was that her father never complained. He never asked for sympathy or explained his suffering. Instead, he carried it silently. "My father never said he was hurting," she said, "but everything he did showed it." By this point, Dean Martin was no longer balancing a public image with a private life. He was simply a father mourning the loss of his son, struggling to find meaning after an unimaginable tragedy. Years later, another difficult chapter arrived when doctors diagnosed him with lung cancer. Dina remembers the room becoming completely still when the diagnosis was delivered. There was no panic or emotional outburst. Instead, Dean listened quietly and accepted the news with surprising calm. What shocked the family most was his response. He didn't ask how much time he had left. He didn't search for alternatives or challenge the diagnosis. According to Dina, he simply nodded as though he had already prepared himself for the answer. When doctors discussed treatment options, including surgery, Dean refused. The decision stunned his family. To some people, it may have looked like stubbornness. To Dina, it felt more like exhaustion. He didn't say he was afraid, she remembered. He just didn't want to prolong it anymore. Over time, family members came to believe the decision wasn't only about cancer. The illness was real, but so was the emotional weight he had carried for years. The loss of his son, the loneliness, and the years of silent suffering had all taken their toll. Dina insists her father wasn't giving up. He simply no longer wanted to continue fighting battles that seemed endless. Following the diagnosis, Dean withdrew almost completely from public life. He stopped making appearances, avoided interviews, and spent most of his time at home. Dina remembers long periods when he would simply sit quietly, reflecting, speaking very little. When people ask why her father refused treatment, Dina's answer remains simple. He was tired, not just from illness, but from decades of carrying pain he rarely allowed himself to express. To her, it was not a dramatic decision. It was the final choice of a man who had spent most of his life hiding his deepest wounds and had finally run out of strength to keep doing so. For Dana Martin, her father's decision to refuse treatment was about more than illness. After losing his son, his motivation, and much of his hope for the future, Dean Martin chose to hold on to one thing he could still control, the right to make his own final decision. When Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, the world reacted immediately. Las Vegas dimmed its famous lights in tribute. Television networks replayed his greatest performances, and fans mourned the loss of a beloved entertainer. To the public, it felt like the end of a remarkable life. Inside the family, however, the emotions were very different. Dina says there was no feeling that a chapter had suddenly closed. In many ways, they had been grieving for years. The man they loved had slowly withdrawn long before the day of his death. "We lost our father before the day he died," she reflected. While the world celebrated his legacy, the family was focused on something much more personal. They weren't discussing his influence on music or television. They were facing an absence that had become familiar during his final years. For them, his passing did not feel sudden. It felt like the final stage of a process that had been unfolding for a long time. In the days after his death, some people quietly suggested that Dean Martin had finally found peace. Dina never directly confirms that idea, but she understands why it exists. "My father didn't leave in pain," she said. "He left in silence." And silence, she believes, was where he felt most comfortable. When she looks back at images of Las Vegas dimming its lights, Dana sees a contrast. The world was mourning an icon, while the family was confronting a loss they had been living with for years. The greatest tragedy, in her eyes, was not the day Dean Martin died. It was how much of him had already disappeared long before that day arrived. After Dean's death, another difficult chapter began for Jean Martin. According to Dana, the hardest part wasn't losing her father. It was watching her mother continue without him. Jean never remarried and never tried to build a new public life. Instead, she quietly stepped away from the spotlight. There were no major interviews, no public attempts to relive old memories, and no effort to remain connected to Hollywood's attention. She simply withdrew and lived privately. For Dina, it seemed as though a part of her mother remained tied to the day Dean Martin died. She kept moving forward, but she never truly left that moment behind. While the world remembered Dean Martin as a legendary entertainer, Dina remembers something more personal, a family forever changed by loss, silence, and the difficult realities hidden behind one of Hollywood's most famous smiles. After Dean Martin's death, Jean Martin chose a life of quiet solitude. She never remarried, never sought attention, and rarely spoke about the past. According to Dina Martin, her mother remained devoted to the life she had spent decades building, even after the person at the center of it was gone. Dina believes her mother's silence was not weakness. It was simply the way she survived. For years, Jean had been the steady force holding the family together. She endured the pressures of fame, protected her children from public turmoil, and carried responsibilities few people ever saw. After Dean was gone, there were no more storms to manage, only the emptiness left behind. Those close to the family noticed that grief never truly released her. She continued her routines and carried on with daily life, but the spark that once drove her seemed to fade little by little. Dina often felt that her mother remained emotionally tied to the loss she suffered in 1995. When Jean eventually passed away years later, Dina did not see it as a sudden tragedy. Instead, she saw it as the conclusion of a long journey marked by devotion, sacrifice, and quiet heartbreak. Looking back, Dana does not describe her parents as perfect people. Her father could be distant, emotionally guarded, and unable to express what he truly felt. He hid behind humor, performance, and the carefully crafted image that made him famous. Yet that is exactly why Dina believes his story matters. Behind the legendary voice and effortless charm was a man carrying fears, regrets, and losses he never fully learned to share. A man who struggled with pain the same way many people do, by keeping it hidden. In the end, Dina believes her father wanted something far simpler than fame or applause. He wanted understanding, and perhaps that is the real lesson behind Dean Martin's life. Not that legends are larger than life, but that they are human. They hurt, they grieve, they make mistakes, and sometimes they fall apart just like everyone else. What do you think? Do we expect too much from the celebrities we admire? Or should public figures be allowed to show their struggles without losing the image people love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.